I am Sean Webb, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Zach Poitras, and this is Your Superior Self.
I'm Andy Mant, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Sue Jackson, and this is Your Superior Self.
I'm Ginny Sarasvati, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
What is up, Superior Nation? Welcome back. This is Your Superior Self. I am your host, Trey Downs. And I just got back from a 4-mile run with the littlest one. And I'm feeling pretty good. I got endorphins kicking in me. And I just got done listening to my conversation with today's guest, Scott Shay. And I can honestly say it's one of the most powerful conversations that I've ever had. And the fact that we connected so well. I mean, we're perfect strangers, and we're having these flow conversations, like flow state conversations, like being in it together in the moment and just clicking on all cylinders. And I'm listening to it. I'm like, wow, like I have forgotten how much I've learned over this entire process of this learning of who I am and the power that I truly am. And I've forgotten the basics of meditation and how to go deeper inside of the power that is me, the soul, the spirit. And I've gotten away from that because I've been just reading and devouring so many different books and trying different methods that I have forgotten the basics of just prayer and meditation and going back inside. And I'm listening to this conversation with Scott, and it doesn't even sound like me. It's just crazy. It's just when you are in the moment, truly in the moment, and you are all in and enjoying the conversation and really believing in the subject that you're talking about, it's like you're drawing from the source that is higher than you. And I'm listening to this conversation, and I'm like, man, like who are these people? Like it doesn't even feel like me. I feel like I was harnessing power from another source, a higher source, and words were coming through me and out of me. And I've forgotten a lot of that. And it's just one of those moments where you take a step back and you listen to your work, or you look at your work as an artist or a content creator or a podcaster, and you're like, man. And I know some of you who have had these moments of like, where did that come from? And I'm truly amazed by the conversation that we had and how powerful it is. It like moved me again, actually the one being the creator of it, speaking, having this conversation, and then as a listener, listening to it, re-listening to it, and just being in awe of the topics that we cover, and just being in awe of the content of just the conversation and how powerful it is, even to me now. As much as I've learned since this interview on different subjects of spirituality, like how much this basic conversation that we have about God, about the Bible, about spirituality and meditation and prayer, like the basics are the most important thing. And if you get away from the basics, then you're getting away from you're just too busy. Like I feel like you're getting away from the source. You're just distracted by the noise. And I'm so glad that I was able to have this conversation with Scott, because I'm going to be able to re-listen to this and just get back to the basics of meditation and going inside of trying to get back inside of me as a spirit, as a consciousness, as a soul, and just trying to harness that inner power. And I'm just saying, like, we're all, and Scott says it best in this clip. Let me just play this clip.
And so what I try to do is take some of the most difficult parts of the Bible and say, okay, let's really read them. We're not going to, this is an apology. Let's just read the words but read them carefully. And what are they trying to say? And so I really encourage people to pick up the Bible, because the Bible it gets back a little bit to what we were saying, which is the Bible presents life as a series of tests. And people either do well or they fail. I mean, Abraham stands up and and really meets a number of tests, and he fails some. By the way, all the characters in the Bible are flawed individuals, like you and me. Well, I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm certainly a flawed individual.
No, I'm definitely
They're
flawed,
all
brother.
flawed. And they all have problems, and they all overcome stuff.
Yes, we're all flawed. And that's the part of life. Like, we're all just trying to get through life and get to the end, and we don't enjoy the journey. We don't enjoy the trials and tribulations along that journey. We just think, we stress that it's too much, or we get depressed because we can't handle it. And it's like, all life is just trying to help you grow and trying to help you get stronger. And we always look at it as a bad thing. But what if you started looking at it as a good thing? All the trials that you've experienced in your life as a good thing. I don't care how bad it is. I don't care how dark it is. Like, it is all a test. It is all a journey that is here presented in front of you to make you stronger. And the only way through it, well, obviously, the only way to get stronger is to go through it and embrace it and look at it as a test. And the only thing that you can do really is just keep going, keep pushing yourself no matter what. And I mean, that's the basis of the conversation. It's that life is a journey, life is a test, and you have a choice. You can either meet it head on, or you can retreat and hide from it, but it's still going to happen. And man, I mean, I get chills just thinking about the conversation and topics we have. Now, I know some of you are asking, who is Scott Shay? Well, Scott is a little different. He's a leading businessman. He's a thought leader. He's the author of 2 great books. He's also the co-founder of Signature Bank, and he founded this bank in 2001. Scott's book, which is actually titled In Good Faith, Questioning Religion and Atheism, has been recognized as one of the best books of 2018 by Mosaic Authors and earned a finalist award from the National Jewish Books. I mean, it's pretty legit. I'm excited to present this conversation to you, and I really hope it helps you as it helped me remember the basics of how to connect with your higher self. But before we get into it, if you guys want to leave me a message, you can do that by going to yoursuperiorself.com and follow me on Instagram at tdowns80 and I think, Twitter at downstrey. All right, guys. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Scott Shay.
Hi, I'm Scott Shay, and this is Your Superior Self.
Scott, welcome, my friend. How are you?
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So what do you got going on? I know it's busy times, crazy times right now. What do you have going on right now?
Well, I have a lot going on right now because I was in the middle of book tour when COVID hit. And so I pivoted to doing a lot of conversations like the one we're having today. I'm also chairman and co-founder of a bank called Signature Bank of New York, which I started with 2 partners. And it's a busy time in the financial world, as you can imagine. I also we just came off of a major pivot at the bank as well, where we changed the jobs of, say, 20% of the people, 20% of my colleagues to deal with the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, because we wanted to get every single person, every single client who applied through. Mm-hmm. So that was a major event. And life in New York is interesting with all of the health issues going on here and the protests going on here. So an interesting time, a lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be a bank owner in these trying times in the financial disarray, I mean, that's first off, how do you even start a bank? Like, how does that even go about? Like, how do you even start one?
Well, during the 90s, I had this crazy idea that New York was over-branched but underbanked. There just wasn't a lot of high-quality banking going on, that the big banks, Chase, Manny Hanny, Chemical, Greater Trust of New York, Trust Company of Westchester, Long Island Trust, JP Morgan, which, by the way, are all one bank, JP Morgan today. They merged 19 banks here in New York, that they were doing a pretty good job for the big companies, and they were doing a passable job for mass market retail because they had the critical mass. But I thought, boy, all these companies in the middle, it was 25 to 500 employees, they really weren't getting good service. So I had this idea to start a new bank because I wanted to create an organization with a new culture, because I think that's so important in business, is what the culture is. And everybody thought I was more or less crazy. I'd worked on Wall Street, I'd worked in private equity, but people thought I was crazy. In the end, I found two partners who also thought I was crazy and initially said no several times. But sooner or later, I convinced them. And then we found a capital source of $42.5 million. And that was 19 years ago. And I'm happy to say 19 years ago in 1 month. And we started the bank, had to get 18 regulatory approvals. We did. And we opened up with this $42.5 million with no deposits, no clients, no revenues. Oh, and by the way, we were losing $2.5 million a month because we'd built the bank to serve these mid-tier corporate clients. But we broke even in 21 months. We went public in 34 months. Today we're an over $50 billion bank.
Wow.
And all organic. We've never done an acquisition. So everybody who comes into the bank has wanted to be there. They made a decision to be there. It's not like we acquired, First Federal or Fourth Federal and merged them in. All people who made a decision. And it's just been such a wonderful opportunity to be involved in creating a culture that I can feel proud of.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Like, I can't even imagine all the work that you have to do, like you said, the approvals, actually building, you had to actually build this brick and mortar place, right? Like, you actually had to go through the entire, and it's in New York City, or is it in state of New York?
We started out entirely in New York City. We opened 5 offices. We rented, we didn't build, but we had to oversee everything. And today we're in New York. We've got 1 office in Connecticut, and we're in San Francisco and LA. But I would tell you that when we started, it was a continuing emergency. It was like it never let up. And it was a couple of years. I tell people who think about starting their own business, you've got to be prepared for what you have to give up, because you can't, not only can't you go home, you're sort of never really free of thinking about the business, of taking calls, of doing things when a bank or a business first starts. It does engulf your life, and you have to have some discipline. Otherwise your family life and spiritual life can suffer, and your health, because you have to give up stuff. You can't do everything.
Well, do you have that freedom now?
Well, I would tell you, I had, before the COVID-19 crisis, I had more balance. But once COVID-19 hit, so many clients were coming to the bank, A, for advice, B, for, in many cases, forbearance or help in restructuring their loans. And then C, when the Paycheck Protection Program hit, it was passed. And as I said, all of our clients, essentially 85+% of our clients, are small and medium-sized businesses. They all applied. And we made a decision that we weren't going to just take some clients, just take borrowing clients. We were going to, this was my sort of bank nerd slogan, no compliant application left behind. And so anybody who fit the bill, we couldn't get people PPP who didn't qualify. Obviously, we have to follow the rules. But anybody who qualified, we were going to get them through the program. That was our plan. So we took 20. Literally, we had senior vice presidents doing keyboard entry because they could do it. and we could, move them. And what they were doing at the moment wasn't urgent. So if you looked in the midst of this at my email from 2 to 4 a.m., you would probably not be able to tell the difference between 2 and 4 p.m. We had people working on 2 and 4 hour shifts around the clock. It was just ridiculous. I mean, when I think about it in retrospect, it's like, I can't even believe we did this, but we did it. And now I have to tell you, everybody's pretty proud that we did this thing. But whoa. And that's what you got to be prepared for. So since COVID-19, I'd say I have a lot less balance in my life, but I'm still working on the book. I'm still promoting. I'm still taking time out, like now at 9 p.m.
I appreciate
to do
that,
podcasts.
man.
This is actually my second podcast.
You're a machine. You're just a marketing machine. I mean, but your book, it's not about banking. Not at all. It's titled In Good Faith. And
yep. Questioning religion and atheism.
Like, how do you go being a professional, a guy in the world of banking and writing a type of spirituality book?
Well, that's a really good question. You got right to the essence in a certain kind of way. I've always had this belief that you should be a whole person. If you have spirituality, if you have faith, then you can't park it at the door. You can't pray in the morning to the Almighty and then spend the rest of your time praying on people. So for me, faith and being privileged to help establish, to help create this bank, to be a partner in creating this bank, meant I could take some of those lessons and apply them. But also, people knew for years that I'm a believer, and I don't wear it on my sleeve. If you met me in the business world, you wouldn't really know it, but people who are friends, people who are good long clients know it. And I kept getting questions, and it surprised me. I kept getting questions like, well, Scott, you're a really reasonable sort of guy. You're a banker. You built this bank. How is it that you believe in God? Isn't that Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny? And then I would get other people who would ask me, who would say, people in the bank who would sometimes ask me, because again, they knew I'm a believer. They would say, I believe in God, but I just think it's sort of an irrational thing. I have to park my reasoning mind at the door and just believe on faith. And what I found is they were reading these books by Christopher Hitchens, the God Delusion. Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion, Christopher Hitchens, Why God is Not Great, Sam Harris's Letter to a Christian Nation. They were reading Michael Shermer, who's written a slew. He's a great writer, written a slew of books about why it makes sense to be an atheist, Daniel Dennett. And they would ask me questions from the book. So the first thing I did is I started reading these books over a period of time. And then I thought, you know what? I got to find a book that can respond to Dawkins and to Hitchens and the like. Because they basically say, you're stupid if you believe in God. And science disproves God, evolution, creation, and a whole bunch of stuff. The Bible was made up, etc. So I got to find a book. That way I can just say, go read this book. So I spent a lot of time reading those books, or reading some of those books. And there were a few that I thought were reasonable. Ellen Plantinga, who was a professor at Notre Dame. I think he's retired now. Karen Armstrong's written some interesting things. But I found the books. I found Ellen Plantinga, who's great, but you sort of need to be in philosophy class mode to read some of him. And Karen Armstrong, I disagreed with a lot. And so I thought, okay, well, I haven't found it. And then it just kept sticking with me that I needed to write this book. And I talk about this in the beginning of the book. I had a lunch that sort of, the penny dropped for me. I said, I got to write this, because people they don't understand what God is all about. They equate God with Zeus. They've just forgotten what idolatry is. And so I started writing the book. And thankfully, I didn't know how long it would take me, because I would have never signed up for a 5-year project where I essentially had to give up bicycling and everything but family. This time I certainly didn't give up family, but I kept family and work. But other than that, I gave up my charitable boards, some volunteer stuff, and I just wrote. So that's how I ended up writing it.
That's amazing. All right, so you say you're a believer, and so you believe in God. So is there any type of religion attached to that? Like,
Yeah, I'm a believer. I'm Jewish.
mhm.
And part of my journey and part of the reason I wrote the book, that it sort of was bubbling up in me, is my father, before he turned 14, he grew up in Sveksna, Lithuania. And before he turned 14, the Nazis marched in and they killed his father, they killed his brother, then they killed his other brother, murdered. I shouldn't use the word killed. They murdered them. Murdered his aunts, murdered his uncles, murdered his cousins. My closest relative is a second cousin once removed. Everybody knew almost was murdered, except for basically 2 people. And he was deported to Svetlin Heldekrug work camp. Then he was sent to Auschwitz. Then he was actually taken from Auschwitz only after a few months. After 3 months, he was quote unquote lucky. I mean, I don't want to, that's a weird way of saying it, but he was sent as part of a work detail to Warsaw to clean up and the like. Then he was sent to Dachau, and he was liberated. When he was liberated from Dachau by the American forces, he weighed less than 70 pounds.
Mm.
And he knew, so I grew up with my father having a certainty that there was a God. Like, I'm looking at we're doing the video as well right now. So if those 2 pictures behind your wall or on your right were just moved a few inches, my father knew that would have been a reason he would have died. He would have been killed. He never would have made it. If that cup were on the other side of your desk, he would have never survived. So he knew with certainty, and I could spend a whole hour telling you stories
Funny
about.
Though? I don't mean to cut you off, but I just got done reading this.
Victor, oh yes, we should talk about it. Victor Frankl.
Literally put this book down. I'm rereading this book. It's just so crazy.
So my father, we can get to that because my father is Exhibit A. So my father knew that there were a whole bunch of miracles. I mean, just getting out of Sveksna was because he was thrown into another line that he wasn't in originally. The line he was originally in, that was a line for people to be killed right then, to be murdered right then. And it goes on and on. And he was only separated running because he was separated from his father. It's just every story, every little thing that happened. So he knew it was a miracle that he got to Chicago, that he was able to marry, have a child, me. But at the same time, he was having the certainty that God existed. He was also pretty angry at God because God didn't save his father, his aunts, his uncles. His mother had died in childbirth previously, so that's why I keep leaving her out, not otherwise. And I also learned from my father a lesson that Viktor Frankl wrote about, which is my father survived 4 years in hell, through the Heldekrug, through all of the concentration camps. I mean, 4 years through hell, 70 pounds, less than 70 pounds. And he did it. The reason he was able to do it is he had belief that one day this would pass. He didn't think it would pass the next day or the next month or even the next year. But he thought if he could keep putting, and he told me this when he was growing up, you got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, surviving one day to the next day, and one day it would be over. I mean, he had also said the people who thought it would be over in a month or 6 months, they ended up dying because they couldn't keep the disappointment was too great. So he was optimistic, but optimistic in a long-term sort of way, if that makes any sense. And
Sure.
it corresponds to Viktor Frankl a lot. And so I grew up with that. That wasn't a book for me. That was my father reacting to stuff that, it was definitely post-traumatic syndrome, because sometimes things would happen and my father would react in a certain kind of way. And my father had one thing that if ever I thought things weren't going well, or, something, this wasn't doing that, you always say to me, it's not the concentration camps. And it's like, there's no comeback.
You can't even say anything to that.
You're just done. Totally shuts it down. Totally shut down.
You can't say anything to that. The Viktor Frankl's book is amazing. It's titled Man's Search for Meaning, and it talks about his time spent in the concentration camps. And it is definitely, it's changed my life. Just in the fact that, like, the world can take everything away from you, like everything, strip you of everything. But the one thing they can't take away from you is your choice on how you're going to react to that. Like, how are you going to move forward? Like, how are you going to get through this? They can't take that choice from you. They can take all your possessions. They can beat you. They can do whatever, but they're not going to be able to take that choice of how are you going to move forward? And that moved me, because it, like you said, no matter what happens to me in my life, it's not going to be the concentration camp, right? But yeah. I move forward with this message from Viktor Frankl. Whatever happens in my life, whatever it may be, how bad it may be, like, I have a choice. I have a choice in how I'm going to learn from it, how I'm going to move on, how am I going to power through it, and, like you said, put one foot in front of the other. And it's a powerful story. It's just crazy how I was just reading this today, and then I'm talking to you, and that's an inspirational story. And, like, your dad lived that at 14 for 4 years.
4 years.
Like, all that hell.
All hell. And, I have to tell you one other thing, that my father, when he was older, when he was in his 70s, he died too young. He died at about 74. But he had a series of strokes. And he was in the hospital. I was there with my mother, and the doctor was saying he had been intubated, and they were saying, well, he can't swallow anymore. We're going to have to start feeding him intravenously. And he said, maybe this is something. And my father was more or less out of it. He was intubated. He was sedated. And the doctor was essentially recommending that we let him go. And he said, I'll never learn to swallow again. And if we keep the tube in and he goes and he has further strokes, he'll just be a vegetable. And he said, he encouraged us to sort of let this be, let nature take its course, as it were. And my father caught that, even though he was being talked over, and he nodded no. And a vigorous no, actually. I still remember it. And so we had him they put in the feeding tube. My father came out of intubation. My father taught himself to swallow again, which is not so easy, apparently. And before he was discharged, they had done whatever, CT or some sort of scans. And the doctor said, we have 40-year-old patients with the same brain damage as your father, and they're in a vegetative state. And my father was not going to take the SATs at that point, but he was totally following he was with it. And it was just that iron will. I don't have a fraction, really. I mean, what he had on his, one finger is more than I think I have.
Well, it does put
but it was
pressure.
An inspiration.
It puts pressure on you, though, right? Like, that is like your dad went through. Like you just said, like he believes in a higher power. Like, he truly believes in God, because one slight move to the left one slight move going into a different line and you're done. And a lot of 4 years of that, of just, you know, just all those miracles, those small miracles every day of getting through that. And then living his life until he's in his 70s, and then having, like, you being a witness to that and seeing the toughness, the perseverance, the faith, like that puts a lot of pressure on you.
So I think, look, I believe we're part of a chain, a long chain, and we have to maintain that chain. And we have to take those lessons. I mean, so that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, is that a lot of people debate. And when I was in live book tour, it would be at most every bookstore or church or JCC or wherever I was speaking, somebody would raise their hand and say, I used to believe, but I lost my sister, my brother, my aunt, my spouse. How can a good God let that happen? And so people are always grappling with this, and it causes some people to lose faith. And having gone through a life growing up where my father was constantly dealing with this, how could basically 99% of the people he knew be wiped out? It gave me, and how did he have faith? He had faith because he essentially believed it was a part of human responsibility. And I grew up with this, that, the Holocaust didn't just happen. It didn't, the Nazis didn't arrive from Mars. It wasn't the War of the Worlds. There was a whole intellectual preparation, and people made decisions. In 1938, there was when the Germans would have let the Jews go, they could have gone. All of them could have left Germany. All of them could have left wherever. And there was the famous Bermuda Conference, and every country was asked to take in some Jews, and only about 3 did anywhere in South America. And the Canadian Prime Minister, Canadian minister famously said no Jews would be too many. In the United States, the administration knew what was going on, and the St. Louis was turned away, and a lot of the people on the St. Louis were sent back to death. Some survived, but many were sent to their death. So people could have made decisions that were different, but they chose not to. And it's like the book of Esther. It's like a lot of the stories in the Bible where there's a test for people, a test for society. And I believe strongly, and this is part of prayer too, I think that if we do the right thing, we do what God would want us to do, that we get a tailwind. But if we're not merciful in our daily life and our practice, well, bad things can happen and they won't be made better. At some point, I think God will intervene. I mean, God didn't let all of the Jews be killed. He didn't destroy the idea of the Jewish people. And Hitler was looking forward to marching on Palestine and killing all the Jews there, and already was collecting names of Jews in the United States. At some point, relief and redemption came, just like it came for the Jews in the book of Esther story, just like it came in a lot of other stories in the Bible. But it comes down to our human decisions. And we need to figure out how to do the right thing. And sadly, too often we don't.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, I'm starting to get more spiritual and awaken to, this idea of, we're here for this learning process and we're here to develop into something higher. And the ego plays so much into that. Like, to actually believe like you are the ego when you're not, like you're the soul is this entity, is this spiritual powerness, like this highly powerful thing. And then they think that the ego the way that the mind tricks the soul into thinking that it's actually in control and that you have to do these things to survive in society. Like, it's just, the pressures of worrying about what you might think of me or somebody else might think of me or how the world's going to perceive me if I do something like this. And you see it now. I mean, you see it on Facebook, you see it on social media, you see it everywhere, where people fall into that idea of you have to be a certain way because society says you have to be a certain way. But people are just programmed genetically to follow along. Because if you're a loner, like, that means death. That means that you're shunned from everyone. That means we don't want you anymore. That's bad. And the ego is all a part of that. I mean, where I'm at now is not trying to kill the ego. I'm trying to live with the ego because I'll never be able to get rid of it. But I'm accepting it as a part of me. But I'm also trying to be more open to this higher power inside of myself, like through meditation, through prayer, like understanding that everything that I read, I'm getting into books like I'm reading Saint Teresa's Interior Castle, which talks about the inner castles inside of us, and I'm reading Zen Buddhist books about meditation and silencing your mind. I'm reading the Seth books, and everything that I read points inward, inside of us, like trying to tap into that power that we have that we don't know, that we forgot about. And through meditation, you find that power. I'm just trying to reach that. And I love having conversations with people like you that are believers, that believe in certain things with conviction. And your book, I haven't read it yet, but I want to, because you talk about that.
Well, for me, you're really getting to the essence of prayer for me. I mean, I pray every day before I get going. And some people in the atheist books, they really criticize prayer. They say it's this magical thinking, it's this, sycophantic praise, but they totally miss what prayer is. For me, and I think this is only something you can get over time. I mean, prayer isn't something that can be easily taught. It's got to be caught, and you've got to sort of get it yourself over time. And it's like, in a way, like a rock. If you were talking about working in stuff, it's like a rock that, you just let water keep going over the rock, and over time it's going to shape that rock. So for me, what prayer is all about, and I talk about this in the last section of the book, it's that we all have things that we can do, things that we're capable of doing. There are also things in the world that need to be done. And usually, and for many people, prayer is, I want a bigger car, a bigger house, a raise, a this, a that. But what I think real prayer is figuring out, is recognizing you are now having, or I'm having, a dialogue with an all-knowing being. I can't be self-deceptive, because it's going to get me nowhere. This being knows me as well as and better than I know myself. So if I'm supposed to be doing something good for my family, for my business, for my friends, for whatever, I can't say, I can't. It's easy to make excuses. We're all geniuses at self-deception, and it's self-righteousness. That's the easiest thing. But if you really believe you're talking to an almighty being, you can't make those excuses. It's like you have this super strong light on you. You don't even need your reading glass. I don't need my reading glasses. Super strong light, and everything is clear. And then I've got to think about it. And if you're like, if you're like me, when you gaze upon that, sometimes you cringe, or I cringe. I really shouldn't be doing that. And then you try to figure out, okay, because I'm a believer. I believe I'm on this planet for some reason. And so how do I get myself from my comfortable right here where I am, making nice self-deceptions and telling myself how just great I am, to where I need to be for the world, for my family, for my counterparties, for my business, for wherever. And I believe if I can move myself to that cross section of what I can do and what needs to be done, I always feel like I get a tailwind.
Mm.
And if I don't, well, things are just going to happen like they were going to happen otherwise. I mean, just like, it's no comparison, but the Holocaust happened because people didn't move themselves. There was things that people could have done. There are things that we could have done, we can do in our society, but it's too much trouble to move ourselves. And we can more easily say, it's tough, it's difficult, I'm doing as much as I should do. That other fella, that other gal, they should do more, then I'll do something. But if prayer is really real and you're taking it seriously and not treating God like a cosmic vending machine, then it moves you as much as it moves God.
Yeah.
And that's when I think you get that tailwind.
Get that momentum. That's why I love meditation, right? Because I feel like that's me listening to God. That's like me listening to his voice through me. Like things will just pop up, emotions that I might have neglected over the years, or a feeling, or some type of creative motivation. I don't know. I'm just so intrigued with experiencing him on a higher level, like a higher consciousness level, like through meditation or prayer or whatever. Like just being open-minded to different beliefs, like different belief systems. Like I am Catholic, so of course I believe and have faith in Jesus and in God and the Bible and all of that. But I'm also, reading more books about, reincarnation, obviously things that are outside of my comfort zone, because I want to learn more about the world. And funny enough, everything, I read Edgar Casey, and it's funny how just everything's linked. Like you see patterns, you see things that are start not necessarily repeat themselves the same fashion or same verbiage, but there's similarities in each of them, in all of them. And it's love. All of them is love. And I just want to feel that that internal grace that God has for us, that love, and feel it on a such more powerful level than I do as a human being right now. Like I want to feel it as my true self, that true power that is within me, my soul, my spirit, like to feel it and to remember who I truly am, and to remember the power that I have inside of myself. And that's what I work towards. That's what I pray for. That's why I get up early in the morning, go for a run, so I can change my consciousness to flow, to change the beta waves to alpha, to theta, so I can be more creative, so I can experience. Because once you start making those the changes in consciousness, that's when you start feeling God. Like you can start feeling. I promise you, you can start feeling him or her or whatever you want to call it. And right now, having this conversation with you, like how powerful that is. Like to be in flow, like group flow. Stephen Kotler talks about it. The different chemical reactions that happen in your mind when you get in so deeply involved in a conversation. It's not even you talking anymore. It's like, I feel like authors talk about this all the time when they're writing books. I'm sure you experience it.
Yep.
At a certain point, you're not writing the book. It's something else. It's some type of force. Some authors explain it as they feel like the words are coming through them, through the earth. They feel that. It's not them. It's like this higher consciousness, this higher being, this something. And that's what I want to experience on a daily basis. And that's why I pray. That's why I meditate, because that's like the most intimate that I can be with that higher power of God. And I've awakened to that. And it's like, once you see the Wizard of Oz, once you see behind the curtain, there's never going back, man. There's never going back.
I had the privilege while writing this book to interview and to sit and to talk. And I got to know Cardinal Dolan, the Cardinal of New York, and Bishop Thomas Murphy, the Bishop of Long Island. At the time, he's retired since. And I talked to other faith leaders, Christian, 2 Muslim faith leaders. I talked to one, Father Alex Carlustos, and I quote all of these leaders because I asked them a lot of the tough questions. And there's much more, by the way, commonality than there is diversity when you're talking about belief in God and basic morality. Really, so much more unity than diversity. Or divide, not diversity, but divide. And Father Alex Carlustos said, you really just have to view God as love. He was paraphrasing. The reason I'm connecting with that is because he sounded a lot like what you were just saying. And that's a Greek Orthodox proto-presbyter, so a senior guy in the Greek Orthodox Church, and he sounds just as spiritual as you did right then and there. And then I found when I spoke to Imam Shamsi Ali, there were times when I was talking to him, he could have been a rabbi. And no exaggeration. He was saying things that just connected with me that I'd heard from rabbis. So there is more when you get to that basic, what am I supposed to be doing? It's a lot clearer, and we're certainly in a flow. I just want to react to one other thing you said separately, which is, and I told so many people, I told my family this. I actually haven't talked about this a lot on podcasts or otherwise, but as I got into this book, I felt like it was in me and it needed to get out. Like I was birthing the book. So I know what you mean in terms of there were things that I wrote for the first time that I almost didn't know I was going to write before I wrote them. And they came, and it's really getting into that flow. I don't know if you ever have time. Another book that I would recommend is by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, Flow. He was a professor at the University of Chicago. I'm probably mispronouncing his name a little bit.
No, that's cool because nobody can ever. It's Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi.
Csikszentmihalyi. Okay, great.
Because
so I never heard it spoken.
Yeah. So Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi is the father of flow. Yes. And I actually had Dr. Sue Jackson on the show. She's like maybe 3 or 4 episodes back. She actually worked with him, and she talks about flow in sports. And then Stephen Kotler, I don't know if you know him or not. He is one of my favorite authors.
Yes,
he writes about flow. He's coming on the show later in the fall. But he talks about group flow and things like that. And we have we always have. I always watch his stuff. I'm a big fan, like I said. But I don't mean to cut you off. I just
no. I think flow is so good. But I also get the feeling when I'm in flow that I'm also in touch with something else. I mean, if you're really in flow, it's meditative, and it's active meditation. And I can be, extremely productive. That's why, frankly, sometimes I work when there's nobody around or at odd hours, and I do isolate myself. I really, really do.
It's crazy. It's like flow. Like you don't even it's like you don't know you're in it. You're like, and then once you realize you're in it, like you're not in it anymore.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That sucks.
You've got to stay. You've got to be at that corner of being non-self-aware and almost consciously non-self-aware, because otherwise you trip out of it.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Kotler talks about it, and I've read all his books. So The Rise of Superman is basically the coolest one because it talks about extreme sports and how extreme sports, because they take it so extreme, they like push the envelope a little bit more, where death is like on the other side of that mountain, and they're skiing, and it forces your body, that fear of death forces your body into flow, and you can do things that seem like Superman. Like time seems to slow down, that sense of self disappears. It's crazy just to listen to him describe it. But to be able to harness that energy, to be able to harness that power in writing, I felt it during podcasts. Like I feel it now. I feel connected. I feel, especially when I'm doing the intros and the before the interview, getting ready for the interview, like. That is, it's powerful. I love it. I love what it does for my creativity. I love what it does for my thoughts, my visions for where I want to go with the show. And like how you're talking about with the writing, like you don't feel like it's you writing. I feel like sometimes it's not even me speaking, things come out and I'm just like, where did that come from? I don't even know that guy. But I mean, what was another book? Like what, you talked about Flow with Mikai Csikszentmihalyi. Like what's another book that really inspired you and like
Well,
developed you?
I have to say, I recommend to everybody the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
because I found on my travels that the less people know about the Bible, the less they like it. So some people, and that's actually section 2 of my book, which is, I've had people say to me, the Bible is the most xenophobic, homophobic, racist, sexist, xenophobic, if I didn't say that already, pro-rape, pro-slavery, immoral screed. And that's because people like the Dawkinses and the Hitchens of the world take various parts of the Bible and totally decontextualize it, or take verses and don't read the verses before and after. And what I did, and just gave some examples in the second section, was I read the book not like I had just landed from Mars, but like I was trying to understand what the book was all about. So let me just give you one example. If you had, during the Obama administration, there were a number of assassinations of the leaders of Al Qaeda, including the leader of Al Qaeda. And if you could just drop from Mars and saw Americans celebrating the death of the leaders of Al Qaeda, you would think, what a blood-hungry people this is. And yet, if that same Martian got some context, well, there was 9/11, and there was some other stuff, the beheadings in Afghanistan, there was this, that, and the other thing. Well, people might understand why that happened. Also, I find people don't really read the words of the Bible. They don't understand what the Bible is actually trying to say, because they have, to some degree, a chip on their shoulder. And the Bible is taught in colleges. It's taught in many places as some sort of historical book written, not even historical, written by some shepherds with too much time on their hands, or returning priests from Persia who were making stuff up to fill their political agenda. And so what I try to do is take some of the most difficult parts of the Bible and say, okay, let's really read them. We're not going to, this is an apology. Let's just read the words, but read them carefully. And what are they trying to say? And so I really encourage people to pick up the Bible, because the Bible it gets back a little bit to what we were saying, which is the Bible presents life as a series of tests. And people either do well or they fail. I mean, Abraham stands up and really meets a number of tests, and he fails some. By the way, all the characters in the Bible are flawed individuals, like you and me. Well, I'm not going to speak for you, but I'm certainly a flawed individual.
No, I'm definitely
They're all
brother.
flawed. And they all have problems, and they all overcome stuff. Moses, why did Moses end up being picked as the person to lead the Israelites out of Egypt? Because when he saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Israelite slave, he did what needed to be done. He attacked he killed the Egyptian taskmaster. Now, put yourself in Moses's position. He was a prince. He was in the pharaonic house. He would have had a cushy life. He had a life better than a rock star does today. Whatever he wanted, harem, this, that, and the other thing. And he saw something wrong happen, and he ended up, the only way to save the Israelite who was being beaten to death was to kill the Egyptian. And he ended up fleeing for his life, giving that all up, spending the rest of his, 40 years with, instead of having his clothes, laundered for him, He had, sheep manure on his feet. And he never knew he was going back to Egypt. This was the rest of his life. He was going to be a Midianite shepherd, from being a rock star, from being a prince. But he did the right thing. And you see that with Esther in the Bible. You see that with Deborah. You see that with Yehuda in the, where he says, I'm going to take me as your slave to the viceroy, he thinks is to the viceroy of Egypt, who he doesn't know is Joseph, and send Benjamin back home because my father will suffer. I mean, they all stand up, men and women, and do the right thing. But when they don't stand up, bad stuff just comes about, because no one was willing to take that act of moral courage. So that's why I really, really love to see people read the Bible, because I think it inspires moral courage. And these days, we need a lot of moral courage.
Heck yeah, man. Now, being Jewish, do you ever read the New Testament when you read the Bible?
I have read the New Testament cover to cover, because I think reading the Christian scriptures, first of all, the Christian scriptures, and a lot of times, are riffing off of the Hebrew scriptures. And I love seeing that. I read, I have that, sensibility, because I do know the Hebrew scriptures a lot better. But you can't read about Jesus without thinking about Elisha and Eliyahu and a whole bunch of other cases, the Passover Seder. I mean, all of these things really resonate.
Well, you're talking about heroes in the Bible that, look at Paul, right? Paul, what he came from, like he was killing Christians, right? And then he had the vision, and then that transformed him. I mean, Peter, who is my patron saint, was a fisherman,
right?
Commoner, guy just out there fishing on a boat, and next thing you know, he's leading the 12.
One thing that's great about the Bible, great about the Hebrew scriptures, and the gospel gets this, like, nails it, is, if you're reading all of the story, all of the book of Genesis, it's about transitions and who's going to inherit the mantle of leadership, who's going to lead the people. That's what the book of, the end of the book of Deuteronomy and Numbers, as it's called in English. How does Joshua get to be the leader? The whole book of Samuel is about leadership, the Davidic legacy. And those same stories come across again in the Christian scriptures. And you can, and again, as a reader, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are as careful readers of the Old Testament or Hebrew scriptures, and that's because they were written in Hebrew, you have a greater sensitivity to that. And Christianity converted most of the world from idolatry, which was really, really dangerous, to monotheism. It was a great gift. It was a gift to the world that is immeasurable.
What's your favorite verse in the Bible?
My favorite verse in the Bible, I have two, so I'm going to have to give you two.
I'm just glad that you can answer that question.
My favorite verse is that my two are that all humans were created, but B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. We all have that spark of divinity within us. So when I deal with you, I'm dealing with a brother. I'm not dealing with somebody who's another. And every other person, I think the Adam and Eve story, the fact that Adam and Eve were created with, and it's allegorical, but we were all created with this spark of God. We're all brothers and sisters. I think we need that lesson now more than ever.
Yeah.
And then in Leviticus in chapter 19, which I think is like such a critical chapter of the Bible, and people can only read one chapter of the Bible, read chapter 19 of Leviticus, which is essentially v'ahavta karecha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, and it elaborates on that. As Hillel summarizes the whole Bible is, don't do unto someone else what you wouldn't want done unto you. The rest is commentary Go learn it. And that's chapter 19 of Leviticus.
I
If
love
we
that.
all just do that, this world would be such a better place.
Absolutely. My favorite part in the Bible, and it sounds bad, but it truly awakens me every time I listen to it, or not listen to it, but read it. It's when Jesus is crucified and his last, like he says, he asks God, he says, forgive them for they not know what they do, or something like that. Like, I'm paraphrasing right now because I
Yeah.
don't have it in front of me. But forgive them for they not know what they do or who they are, something like that.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of the power that is inside of us, that we don't realize what we truly are. We're like, that reminds me of the ego. That reminds me of, we're doing things because of what we think we are, but we're not. We don't remember who we truly are. That power, like you were talking about, that internal power, that internal godliness that is inside of us, that power. And every time I think about that, it's like, reminds me, Trey, do you even know, like, your true power that is inside of you? Do you understand that? You don't. Because if you did, you wouldn't worry about the things that are happening to you right now. You would feel them, you would embrace them, and you would love, and you would continue to push forward, and you would continue to work, continue to grind, and to love your neighbor. I mean, it's just that one verse is just so powerful to me, because it awakens me every time I read it.
So I think it's so important, and this is, I think, like, I talk to a lot of believers and non-believers in the book tour and lectures. I've spoken all sorts. I've really been privileged to speak in a lot of different places. I think that the thing that, to a certain degree, separates believers versus non-believers is this: we all know that there's one important day in our life when we entered this world, our birthday. We have our opportunity to do whatever we're going to do. But if you really believe that we are just an artifact of physical laws that happen to be in this unremarkable sun, in this unremarkable corner of the universe, in this third rock from the sun of that unremarkable sun, and a whole bunch of things happen that just ended up happening, that we happen to be conscious beings, and that was just our good fortune, then you can do whatever you do and it doesn't really matter in the end. But if you believe, then you have this sense that you're on this planet for some purpose, which is what I was talking about prayer and why I think it's so valuable. Most of us have no idea what that reason is, and we spend our lives trying to figure that out. But if we figure out what we are here for or what we can do, then our whole life is different. That's what that it becomes our guiding impulse. And you're 100% right. I can speak for myself that it's hard to know oneself. It's hard to give advice because it's hard to even, you can't even really give good advice to yourself. And that's why I love prayer, because it's this no deception zone.
Sure. Love it. Scott, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, they can go to my website, Scott Shay, Scott, 2 T's, SHAY.com. And my book is available. I was going to say, before COVID-19, it was available in all bookstores everywhere, essentially. Now it's more or less Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com, but you can get it pretty easily. You can get in touch with me via the website. And the only thing I would say is this: because I've had a few of these happen recently, which is, I try to respond to people. I try to respond to everybody, but I've been getting some chapter length questions and I can't really deal with those. So if someone wants to reach out to me, keep it short, keep it simple. I try to respond to those. The super long ones, because I'm talking about religion, it's just very, very hard for me to grapple with those.
So since this has been a pretty deep conversation, I'm going to end it off pretty deep as well. Scott, what do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be that somehow, some way, I left this planet a better place than than it otherwise would have been.
That's a great goal, brother. Thank you so much for joining the show, Scott. This has been a fantastic conversation. I loved every minute of it. I really hope people go and check out your book. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you.
I would love to thank Scott for coming on the show and hanging out with us today. I want to say thank you to you, the listener, for downloading this podcast and taking the time out of your busy schedule to really listen to us. And hopefully you guys can share this episode, and people that need to hear it will be able to pick it up from you. And please leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast from. It helps me scale the show. And if you want to follow me on social media, you can do that as well. On Instagram at tdowns80 and on Twitter at downstrey. I have a Facebook Your Superior Self page. You guys can like that and follow everything that's going on behind the scenes. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. And I hope you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you later.